with brain techniques and neuroscience, you just start to realize that it is not a limitation or a disability. It's considered a disability, which fair enough it can be, because if we don't understand it or certain symptoms can be very extreme, it can be a disability. But it's just a different way of thinking or a different way of using different parts of your brain. You can be extremely creative, innovative, risk-taking. You're 300% more likely to become an entrepreneur if you have ADHD, because you use parts of the brain that are more impulsive, more risk-taking, and you become more fearless, but you're also creative and innovative, and that's beautiful, and the world needs that as well. It's just, it feels like a disability because we're in a rigid system of like, you need to do this, you need to learn in this way, but we haven't been taught how to learn. We're just given this information, and it's like, you go and learn that. But when we understand our brains and how our brains absorb information and how different brains need different approaches, then it's not debilitating, it's actually empowering.
Hello dear listeners, and welcome back to On The Way with me, George, and I'm really excited to be in conversation with my guest today. Today we're going to be exploring how we can create new habits in our brain, how we can train ourselves to really step into the most beautiful, empowered versions of ourselves. We're also going to explore some of the challenges that we have in our brains and our neuroplasticity and the certain programming that our brains may have, including ADHD, and how to navigate that and the agitation of the modern world. And we are blessed to have an expert in this conversation today, David Amor. What a pleasure to be with you. How are you doing this morning, afternoon, evening?
Hello. Yeah, no, I'm doing wonderful. I'm excited to be on the program and have these provoking conversations.
Well, I'm excited to provoke and to stir with you. For somebody who doesn't know your work, could you give us a little bit about what you do and what you're passionate about? What wakes you up in the morning?
Sure, yeah. So the simple answer is I train brains for a living, but when I introduce myself like that, people think of the brain training DS game straight away. But it's a lot deeper than that. I love to empower individuals with neuroscience techniques so that they can reach their goals and their dreams and really achieve who they want to be on an authentic level.
Beautiful. And what does that look like? Like, why brain training particularly, as opposed to, coaching or that sort of world? Like, what does that look like for you?
So it is very similar to coaching, but my approach is also quite different, and it's more of an educational perspective. So it's using the context of neuroscience to help people recognize why they might have certain habits, why they might act or behave in certain ways, and how that relates to the programming and the genetic makeup of our brain, and how we can kind of go beyond those own limitations that we set ourselves, and with that awareness and knowledge we can really evolve.
Beautiful. And if there was like one nugget, like just like we're going to get deep, but like if there's one nugget where it's like one fact about our brains that people don't know, have you got any zingers for us just to kick us off?
What percentage of our thoughts do you think are negative?
Well, I know we have the negativity
On average,
bias
yeah.
as humans, and yeah, I can attest in my own life that the underminer, the little inner critic of catastrophizing and thinking things are going to go wrong all the time, is something that is alive in me. I would say, like if it's negative, positive, neutral, I'd say 30% negative, 20% positive, and then 40% just meh. It's just daily stuff.
Okay. That's an interesting answer. No one's ever thought about the neutral thoughts.
Yeah. I think I may have missed out 10% there, but we can round up.
Moving on. It's a little bit higher. It's depending on the study, it's 70 to 80% negative on average. Wow. And that's a healthy human brain.
That's what we were born with then. It's one of my things on my journey. We can change it. Because on my journey, like I started anxious and confused, and was beating myself up for like I should be stronger, and like
Yeah.
I'm weak for finding things so hard, and I wouldn't really express it, and I'd feel shame about it.
Yeah.
But if 80% of my thoughts are negative, then maybe I'm not alone with that challenge of being a human.
Exactly. A lot of people put shame onto their own thoughts for, why am I thinking this negative? Why am I like this? And like sort of this regret and guilt, and it kind of cycles. But actually, your brain is just being a brain. And sometimes the quicker we embrace that, the quicker we can change it with gentle challenge and love.
Gentle challenge and love. Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, because that's really, in my journey and what I share, it's like we can only ever start from where we are. And we only ever are where we are. You know, it's like the past exists only in memories that are imagined right now. And the future only exists in potentialities imagined right here, right now. So we can only ever be where we are. And if we embrace where we are, then that creates the spaciousness from which we can grow and we can move.
I love that. Yeah.
How do we begin that journey of growth? Because it can feel like, you know, this is the way I am. I'm stuck like this. And, you know, I'm 70 years old and I've been reactive my whole life. Who are you telling me I can change?
So it does actually sometimes depend on the age. So our neuroplasticity and the ability to sort of mold, adapt and change, that peaks at age 25. And then depending on our lifestyle, we can either increase that neuroplasticity or it can decrease. And most of the time what happens in today's society, because of the pressure and the doing a job that we don't love and that the stress that comes with that and loneliness and the inability to connect with each other, all of that affects our lifestyle and that negatively impacts our brain, which then actually reduces our neuroplasticity. So there's two branches after 25. We either go up if we have a good, balanced, healthy lifestyle, or we either go down and then our neuroplasticity becomes less. And what happens then is you become very rigid in your thinking, your habits, and it's very hard. And, you know, you see these individuals with maybe fixed mindsets where they're not open to growth or absorbing new information. Yeah.
That's new for me. So, because I knew about like from 25, the neuroplasticity starts going down, but that you can through training increase the neuroplasticity? And is there a point at which, you know, like, does then age just inevitably take over, or how much power do we have to be more flexible?
I still have to figure that one out. I will be the living example and let you know. But yeah, at a certain age, you know, again, it's really dependent on our lifestyle habits. For example, our sleep. Sleep is so important. If we don't have sufficient sleep, we can't essentially flush these molecules in our brain that are toxic for us, which then affects neural pathways, which then increases early onset of Alzheimer's, dementia. But with our sleep, we can flush all of these molecules. So that would be an example of like a really good brain habit to have, to just get rid of that toxic chemical.
Any tips on getting that sleep quality? Like how do we do that?
I guess we first need to understand why we don't sleep well. Because sometimes we might think we're sleeping well as well, but we might not get into a deep sleep because our brain doesn't feel safe enough to fall asleep. And so it kind of stays on this alert mode. It doesn't completely switch off. And essentially we just need to train the brain or remind the brain that it is safe. Right? Our brain is wired to survival. Evolution is an evolutionary design to keep us safe. So it will do everything it can, even if it sabotages us, to keep that protective mechanism in place. And sometimes that affects our sleep. So we got to ask ourselves, what is keeping us up? Is it this feeling of I wasn't productive enough? Was it this feeling of I'm not enough? Or not recognizing the good things in a day? So yeah, sleep is a very important one. And actually, I know a lot of people hear this word and it's thrown everywhere, and people might not connect with the word when they don't truly understand the neuroscience behind it. But gratitude is so important, especially before you go to sleep. If you practice gratitude and you journal what you're grateful for in the day, that automatically sets your brain to, oh wait, I have this, I am enough, I did have a good day, I have these positive things, I am safe, I'm allowed to fall asleep. And you kind of fill that void that you might feel at the end of the day. Gratitude is one of the top ways in neuroscience to really rewire a brain. And the most effective time period to do that is before sleep, to remind ourselves that we're safe. But also, whilst we dream, we're actually still processing the last thoughts that we had before sleeping. So for 4 hours, our brain is still creating these neural networks with information of the last thoughts it had. So if we go to bed with a negative bias, which is 70% of the time our thoughts will be negative if we allow it to be, then we wake up feeling unmotivated, less energy, and we just feel like, what are we doing?
Beautiful. And that, those first 20 minutes of the day, last 20 minutes of the day, it's the energy that we enter into sleep. And that's beautiful. I didn't realize, like, for hours, all of this processing is happening. And if that energy that we go to sleep with is going to be carried into that processing.
Exactly.
So let's make that a beautiful energy, an inspiring, empowering energy. Same thing when we wake up. I notice grumpy George when I wake up. But I know now that, okay, this is me. Like, when I wake up, I'm a bit grumpy. And so I really am conscious of not just going down where my thoughts are taking me. And instead, I choose my affirmations there. So that's where I do my affirmations. And I used to think affirmations were just kind of self-help nonsense. But I really, really believe they're powerful, because as we're expressing, and maybe I'd love to get your thoughts on that, what's the energy I want to bring into my life? I'm just going to be present with that energy for just this sentence and feel that it's true just for that moment. And then we train our nervous system that is available to us throughout the rest of the day.
See, that's key. And I love that you used the word, we have to believe in that. We have to trust that this is real in this moment. Because there is some contradictions with it, because if you say these self-affirmations and you keep repeating it to yourself, but subconsciously there's a disconnect and you don't truly believe this, what can happen is you might actually psychologically reinforce the idea that you're not this person, because you keep repeating, and because you don't actually believe it, you're like creating this distance and this disconnect from who you truly want to feel. So when you do self-affirmations, it's so important to actually feel that it's true. Otherwise, you're kind of feeding yourself this unrealistic information and you keep creating this disconnect. So it's actually how you approach self-affirmations is really important.
Yeah, and I invite the people that I work with and in my own life is to play with it. It's like actually to not take it so seriously, but actually to, in that moment, this is true. So it's like, some of my affirmations is, like from the Tao Te Ching for the Taoists from ancient China. Lao Tzu, the author of this book, talks about the 3 treasures. So he says, I have 3 treasures. I use them as compasses to guide my life by. They are compassion, humility, and moderation. And so each morning I wake up and I'm groggy and grumpy George is maybe awake, and I go, okay, well, with compassion, and I give myself a hug, and humility and moderation, I serve fearlessly, and in that moment it's playful and it's silly, but I'm in that moment it's real. Like, I serve fearlessly. In that moment I am that. And so then maybe there will be fear that comes up during the day, but the crucial bit is if we embody the words, if it's just the words and we're robotically saying them, there's no energy there. But if we're in it, that's when it can have real power.
Yeah, it's the emotions, the energy associated to those thoughts, to those words, that will reinforce it in the right or wrong way. Yeah.
What energy do you invite into your life? Like if there was, something where you notice the negative thinking, like what's your, some of the key phrases that you use to support you?
I guess I separate that side of me. I sort of label that side and kind of not dissociate, but I see it as a separate brain to me. So for example, if I see that negative side, I would call that's the judge. That's judge mode nice. David, right? Judging nice. Himself or other people. Because judging is a trait that every single human has. It's for our survival, it benefits our survival. But in today's society, that judge mode can create disconnect from, these authentic relationships. So I just label that negative side to me, or negative, it's natural. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's Judge David. And then I show myself compassion. And I celebrate in that moment of, okay, I just raised awareness to that side. I gently challenged it with love. I showed myself compassion. And I celebrate in that moment. Like you said, being silly and fun is actually so important because you release dopamine. And with that chemical, you can reinforce those neural pathways and you can reinforce that new way of thinking. So if you're having fun with it, it's more likely to stick. It's more likely to become a part of you truly. So I smile every time I catch myself in judge mode and gently challenge with love. I smile and nod my head. And that releases dopamine. Just the act of literally smiling and nodding your head will reinforce that thought process.
Beautiful. I love that so much. Yeah, the noticing the judge, naming it, and then with love and compassion to say, okay, here it is. Here's the humaning thing, and that's okay. And I think one of the most healing parts of my journey has been seeing myself in terms of parts. So, here's the judge. So I've got like a motley crew of parts now. So I've got the underminer.
Who are they?
the underminer who's a little evil wizard saying, still single, are we? You're flawed goods.
Oh my God, I feel you.
That's a pernicious one. Then there's Georgie, who wants love and connection, and which is beautiful, but also can be insecure. Then there's the taskmaster, who is my inner disciplinarian and demands full integrity in all moments, to be working with uber productivity and to be an activist and to change the world. And it's beautiful because it gives me a lot of energy to change and to take action, but also it can be a lot. So exactly that process you're expressing is that then instead of identifying fully with these thoughts, it's just, okay, this is a part of me, and this is an energy, this is a part of my psyche as a human being, and we have these common patterns as human beings, and this is okay. And to celebrate the noticing, I love that as well.
Yeah.
With a light smile. Even the word judge, so yes, there obviously is a judge in us. So we judge ourselves, we judge other people. I was guided by a mentor to stop even seeing this part of myself as a judge. So okay, I'm not good enough for, I need to have more friends. I need to be in a relationship. So, that's me judging myself. Okay, it's okay. Here's the judge. I'm going to send love. Whereas actually another option is that we see them as advisors. Okay. So, but often their words are really flawed or not that skillful. So the challenging thought of you don't have enough friends, therefore you're not good enough comes up. Okay, you're advising me something, but what do you really need? What are you really getting at? It's I have a need for love and for connection and to belong. Okay, great. So I agree with that need. That need is important. But then actually this idea that just because I don't have friends right now means I'm not enough and not whole as I am. Actually, I'm not too sure about that. So thank you for your advice. But from my place of wisdom, I'm actually going to just let you go. And, I'm going to just keep living my life. Or then an affirmation where actually, no, I am whole already. I'm open to connection. I look forward to seeing how connection arises on my path. But I'm not going to be on this constant judgment and not judgment battle with myself.
Yeah, because then you're judging the judge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, meta judging.
Yeah. No, I really agree with that approach.
I'd love to move on to ADHD, and I'd love to, because this is something that a lot of my friends explore and work with in their own lives and in my own family as well. And for those that don't know what ADHD is, and could you give us maybe your relationship with ADHD, how you came into this being something that you have been investigating, and then what is ADHD?
So everything I do, I guess it came alive because of my ADHD journey. And yes, there's a story behind what I do and why I love what I do, and it's a powerful purpose for me. And I guess it all started in high school, when I didn't really truly understand myself, and I felt like I was always lagging behind my peers. It would always take so much energy and time to do this homework or to do this task, and teachers would see me as this kid that was rebellious or lazy when I was truly trying with all my heart to focus, to pay attention, to get the homework in on time. And I was seen as this bright, smiling, happy kid always, to then really masking my feelings and really feeling depressed, which I wasn't aware of back then, because a lot of people think depression is like complete sadness and extreme negative emotions, but actually it's the inability, it's the lack of motivation to do things. And so I didn't quite understand my brain and my neurochemistry back then, and it was just a huge struggle. And I eventually, just to make the story shorter than what it has to be, I got kicked out of school. My mom was told, honestly, the most devastating words a mom could hear. She was called up by the school, and they told her, sorry, but your son is not worthy of education.
Oh my God. Wow.
And of course, my mom had this vision of me of like, well, he's a smart kid. I'm very lucky to have my mom and the way she brought me up. And we searched for other schools to see who would accept this reject kid. And literally no school wanted to take me in. And so they had to expand their search. My parents, they were very supportive. And we finally found one school that was like, okay, we'll give you a chance of an interview, but that's it. No promises, because we're full capacity. And that was the first time I ever felt heard and seen and supported. I was able to express myself and explain that I do care about my education. I just struggle and I'm trying my best. Anyway, I had these constant burnout cycles of really pushing myself last minute, pressuring myself with exams and not truly understanding how to revise, but the only way was last minute with tons of stress. And then I would burn out for months and not feel energy to do anything. And so finally, after years, I got an ADHD diagnosis quite late. I was 25. But then everything made sense. Finally, I understood myself, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not like, this is why I find this difficult, And it's quite validating. However, it's also quite dangerous. And I say this with love. But once we have this label, it can truly become our identity. You have ADHD, you can't focus, you can't do things, you are hyperactive, or you are very passive and dissociated all the time. And sometimes, like the coaching approaches or certain therapy approaches, it can be reinforcing that identity of like, this is it, this is who you are. And I realized I was going down this tunnel, I guess, of limiting myself and believing I was all my symptoms and that's it, that is me. But then one day I just woke up and I realized, wait a second, I can be more than this, you know. I want to dream big. I want to do these things and help people, and to do that I need to grow and evolve myself. And I realized how limiting my sort of thinking was, because I thought that was my identity. So ADHD no longer defines me, it's just a part of me. And with brain techniques and neuroscience, you just start to realize that it is not a limitation or a disability. It's considered a disability, which fair enough it can be, because if we don't understand it, or certain symptoms can be very extreme, it can be a disability. But it's just a different way of thinking, or a different way of using different parts of your brain. You can be extremely creative, innovative, risk-taking. You know, you're 300% more likely to become an entrepreneur if you have ADHD, because you use parts of the brain that are more impulsive, more risk-taking, and you become more fearless in some instances. But you're also creative and innovative, and that's beautiful, and the world needs that as well. It's just, it feels like a disability because we're in a rigid system of like, you need to do this, you need to learn in this way, but we haven't been taught how to learn. We've just given this information, and it's like, you go and learn that. But when we understand our brains and how our brains absorb information and how different brains need different approaches, then it's not debilitating, it's actually empowering.
Beautiful. Yeah, just really touched by you sharing your story. And yeah, I think that's a gift to any listener that resonates with your journey, and I'm just mourning for your younger self of those words of your son is not worthy of education. I mean, the lack of compassion there, and the lack of understanding, and then the stories that, you know, it's quite hard to not then be defined by that story. So I really honor you. It's like, you know, I feel more connected to you, and that's the beauty of, like, you know, our vulnerability and our pain now, because like I see you as a man that has done so much work on himself, and then just has really just was given that story by one teacher, and then said, no thank you, I'm gonna find my own story and find my own way. I think I'm grateful now. I don't know what you think of like the rising awareness of neurodiversity. So I wonder, would teachers be different now? And also you speaking to, I think the important point is that the diagnosis is great to help us understand ourselves, and also if we get too stuck in that definition, then we can actually limit ourselves. So what do you think of, like, how do we navigate that as a society, or in education, with diagnosing children or diagnosing ourselves while also not limiting ourselves?
No, it's quite a sensitive topic, and it's quite a difficult one to know what the right answer is. See, for me, I'm grateful that I had my diagnosis late, which is very contradicting to what most people would think. You would think, well, if you know earlier, you get the right support and everything. But then that also means that your neural networks in your brain is going to be thinking, well, this is what I'm capable of, and this is my ceiling, this is how small I'm going to be, because this is the way to do it. But I think if we train schools to teach kids in terms of the neurodiversity of, it's not a debilitating label, it's actually an empowering one. It's just a different way of thinking or approaching things. And that's a strength in itself. We don't all have to be exactly the same. You know, so I really find these variances and diversity amazing, but society has made it seem as if it's like not a good thing, right? It's just, we need different people. We need different mindsets, different ways of like changing the world. And everyone is just as valuable. So I think getting a diagnosis early can only be beneficial if that label is seen as empowering and not limiting. But I think a lot of training needs to go into the schools. Like right now, I do workshop with students, and they absolutely love the learning approach that I have with them. And they're like so engaged. They're like, no one else does it this way. And so I feel like if we could just train teachers or like people of influence in the education system to kind of increase the belief that these kids have in themselves and to not limit themselves, I think that's key. And I don't think we need to be defined by neurodiversity. I think it's just a part of us that we can take advantage of. It's a strength, it's a superpower. We just need to see it in that way. And I know people might think that's toxic positivity. No, it's just a different brain, and that's valid.
I love it. And yeah, I feel like the line, like an early diagnosis is only valuable if it's not seen as a disability, but a label of empowerment.
Exactly.
Really powerful. Yeah, like that should be on your book.
Yeah, one day.
Because I really hear that, and I think the neurodiversity doesn't have to imply a hierarchy. It doesn't have to say, well, there's lots of different brains that this group works in this way, this group works in this way, and you've got a bit of this and a bit of that. So Exactly. It doesn't need to be this group is better than this group, and if you've got this diagnosis, then you can't do this. I mean, if we were to just take the toxic positivity as like, well, I disassociate and I zone out and I can't concentrate. Like, who are you to say this is a gift? So, like, what would you say? How would you respond to somebody saying that actually this is your gift and your uniqueness?
Well, firstly, I guess it's understanding. It's always understanding why. Why are you dissociated? So the human mind will find protective mechanisms to keep you safe. And we kind of create different traits. And some of those traits are avoidance. So our thoughts will trigger an emotion, a biochemical reaction in our body. That can be a negative reaction. It could be a feeling of fear. And when that happens, we go into a fight or flight mode. We're like, okay, this is a threat now. We have this feeling, this negative emotion. For example, if we're doing a homework or an exam and we're procrastinating revision, it's because we have a negative association to that activity. So our thought is, I might fail. Fear. So then the behavior after that, as a result of that negative emotion, is I'm either going to run away from this thing or confront it. And, if a tiger's running at you, you're more likely to run away. And so that's an avoidance mechanism. So when we feel very dissociated, it's probably because we're fed up of feeling a certain way and we want to disconnect from reality. It doesn't feel safe. So we dissociate, and then that creates sort of the ADHD symptoms, you could say. So we need to understand, why are you dissociated? And it doesn't always have to be like that. Like, I have tons of energy. I can be fully immersed. But back then, I had no idea I could be this version of myself. So, what my superpower is, I'm very empathetic because I've had to learn to observe human behavior, to adapt to people, because I've always felt slightly different, and that's made me a good communicator, and I get to connect with people on a deeper level. So that for me is a gift, thanks to my ADHD, you could say. But it just doesn't necessarily define me. It just empowers me in the ways that I let it empower me. So to that individual, I know I just gave you a long answer. I would say, what is limiting you? Why is that your limiting belief? And how can we get you from this fixed, limited mindset to a growth mindset so that you can grow and evolve beyond your own labels, beyond your own symptoms. Okay, because there's a reason for these symptoms. There's a root cause, and it's probably a chemical imbalance or a lifestyle imbalance, and we just got to put the pieces in like a puzzle, understand what is the neuroscience behind this individual so that they can feel empowered. Because, for example, ADHDers, they're amazing at hyperfocus, but it happens so inconsistently and randomly that it's very hard to like activate that. But when you know the neuroscience, I can enter flow states on demand any day of the year. But we've never been taught how to do that. But we just need to understand the neuroscience. So, yeah, an ADHD brain could be amazing for productivity. Just need to understand how.
Beautiful, I love that. And I'd love to understand, your thoughts on how to get into that flow state like that. What was coming up for me as you were explaining that is, like, because that feels like quite a human thing. So, like we have traumatic experiences that happen to us or painful experiences, and either we go towards them, fight, or we run away from them, flight, or we freeze.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, like, what is different about the ADHD brain? Like, is it nurture? Is it some traumatic experiences? Is it nature? It's a big question, but what's different about that brain?
It's a really good question. And I've asked this question to experts, and they can never truly give me an accurate answer. It's a bit of everything, but there's a lot of overlap with the symptoms of trauma and the symptoms of ADHD. Right? So we dissociate to kind of hide away from our feelings, and we lose our energy, and we become very like passive. And that could be because we're running away from something, this feeling, and that our brain has just created a protective mechanism, and that can show signs of ADHD. And when our thoughts are very like active and we ruminate, there's a certain part of the brain. I've got my little brain here as well. So the amygdala is this little pea-size thing.
I need to get myself one of these.
Yeah, no, they're great. They're great. My clients use them as a stress ball sometimes. But yeah, that part of the brain, the amygdala, it can be very hyperactive and very hypersensitive when there's a lot of emotions of fear and negative emotions. And then the amygdala, when the amygdala is in command, it actually shuts down other parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive functioning, which is the issue with ADHDers. They have less executive function because their prefrontal cortex isn't the same, essentially. So there's a concept known as the amygdala hijack, where it can literally shut down other parts of the brain because it feels under threat. The brain feels under threat, so it wants to go into this survival mode. And that feeling of being restless or super busy or super hyperactive, maybe that is a sign of, what is that trauma, or what is that thing that you're running away from? What is that uneasy feeling? And so, yeah, ADHD, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, this isn't fact, can be nurture, but I think it's more the symptoms of ADHD. It's hard to say, is ADHD strictly genetic? And then ADHD symptoms are not more from the nurture experiences and social side. Yeah. It's hard to know. But yes, genetically, it definitely can be passed on.
Yeah, because there seems to, like, something I've read about genetics and then epigenetics. So genetics is, we have this DNA code, and it's like the structure of a play. It shows kind of the rough outline of what's going to happen. And then experience is what fills out that play into it actually line by line. And with epigenetics, there can be flexibility around how each gene is expressed. And so if we live in worlds that are hyper agitated, and then schools that then try and get you to sit down and not move for 7 hours a day, and then you also hate it, then suddenly that's going to create neurochemistry that then creates tendencies to want to disassociate and withdraw, and then
100%.
that compounds over time. So I do see how it could be both then. So like that brain could be more, have a propensity to disassociation, but then it's really the experience that activates that tendency.
Exactly.
So I'd love to, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'm loving this conversation, and I'm really grateful for your just, like your first-hand experience, and just really celebrating that you haven't been limited by these definitions, and yet still also a load of compassion to understanding yourself. And for me, that's in my ignorance of not having a diagnosis, but knowing people that do, I do think that middle ground, it's both and. It's like the diagnosis is helpful, and you're so much more than it. So don't allow yourself to be tied down by it. I'd love just, if we were to leave with one thought, is like, those flow states. If somebody have an ADHD brain, have you got a minute on like, what have you found in your life to help you really bring out the best in yourself?
In a minute. Okay. Well, it's going to sound so obvious, but it's honestly the best thing you can do. When you go to sleep, leave your phone far away from your room. Leave it outside of your room. Wake up the next morning without having access to your phone. Because actually in the morning, because of certain brain waves, you could program how you feel for the rest of the day, depending on what you do in that instance. So you kind of have this neuroplasticity in the morning, okay? So if you wake up using your phone and getting those instant hits of dopamine and that instant gratification, your brain is going to be seeking that for the rest of the day. So it's the intention on how you start the day. And that begins with the night before. Go to bed with, I am going to do this thing tomorrow. I'm going to make it work. And get rid of the biggest distraction, which is that dependency on our phone. And the mere presence of our phone actually uses our cognitive resources. We're fighting subconsciously, to resist the urge. But if we take the phone out of the picture and we hide it somewhere where it's completely out of sight and we know it's not available, it's completely turned off, we can then all of a sudden use our cognitive resources for focus and flow state. And I have workshops all dedicated for flow state. So I'll be doing some events in London on how to truly enter and manipulate the conditions. So it's all about understanding the flow stimulators, the flow inhibitors, and finding the balance between the two so that we can create the neurochemistry we need, because it's all neurochemistry. A flow state is neurochemistry. And once you know those conditions, you can then enter a flow state. But my recommendation is, in 1 minute, is a phone.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and we'll have links in the description to all of David's work, so you can check him out and go show him some love on socials and his events. And leaving the phone away has been really powerful for me. Blocking, I'm a good advocate for blockers, because it just takes the decision away, and then we can really open up the space for our own gifts and our creativity. So David, thank you so much for your time and for your energy. Sending my best vibes for you to continue to serve your community and the people that you work with. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, George. Keep serving powerfully and fearlessly. Was it fearlessly?
Serve fearlessly. Ha.
Yes, serve fearlessly. My guy. All right. Thank you, George.
Thank you, David.